Welcome, everyone. I'm Alan T, and this is the second episode of Alan T's Got Answers. For those who didn't see the first episode, I'm just going to recap and say that the reason why I'm doing this is to help me pass the time and to try something new. And so the hope is that you, the viewers, will leave some questions in the comments and questions that you're interested in seeing what my answers might be. So, to not waste any more time, let's get right to it. Okay, this question is from a pretty good friend of mine. And what's interesting is that this friend said that they actually had a hard time answering it or couldn't answer it. And so I thought that was interesting. And so I felt like since they kind of struggled with it, that I should probably give it, the most thought that I could. So the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's an interesting question. Obviously, it's probably perplexed a whole lot of people over the years. And usually this question is asked when you're young. And I'm sure it's meant to spur your thoughts as far as what you want to be. If you want to be a doctor or a lawyer. Usually it has to do with being, from a job standpoint. And so what's interesting is that, if you think about it strictly from a job standpoint, then it kind of limits you. And so as I started thinking about it, I'm just like, this is an interesting question to be asked when, I'm 52 and I'm growing up already, or at least I think I'm growing up. Although for the most, I still feel like I'm the same little teenager or little child that I always have been. I'm just in this older body. And so I'm sure most of you people who are my age or close to it can relate. And so I found it kind of a perplexing question to me as well, because I'm just like, okay, well, how am I supposed to answer this at this stage in my life when I feel like I've kind of already... I feel lucky that I've been successful. And so from this point in time in my life, if I'm going to try and decide or answer the question of what I want to be when I grow up, I guess that means what do I want to be, further on down the line, or more, what do I want to be right now? And so it's like a multifaceted question. And like I said, typically it's something that's asked when you're young and meant to, spur a child to positively motivate them to go into a certain career or to just think more deeply. And so I started really thinking deep on it, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer at this point in time in my life, and I don't necessarily know if I want to think about it from, a career standpoint. I guess what I really want to do is I want to think about it from a me standpoint, from what I want to be. Not necessarily what I want to do with the rest of my life, but what I want to be, because that's kind of the question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? So I really started to think about it and, I don't know, kind of got deep on it and was like, I think I know what I want to be. And it's something that I've always been. And I think I want to be intriguing. And so to answer, what does intriguing mean? So I actually had to look it up. And look up some definitions of it and, kind of do some more research on it. And what I found was, I'm going to have to read it to you, is the definition. If someone is intriguing, it means that they are interesting or fascinating, especially because they are unusual or mysterious. Yeah. I was just like, oh yeah, that's not only does that what I want is that what I want to be, but I feel like that's who I've always been. And I feel like for the most, like everybody out there who's ever been perplexed with this question, more or less feels the same way. Everybody wants to be different. Everybody wants to be unique. Some people don't. Some people like, kind of following along and going along with the crowd. But there's probably a larger handful, or not a larger handful, but a larger amount of people that really just want to be different. And obviously, we can tell that by all the inventions and all the songs and all the art and everything else that people just want to be different. So when I started thinking about being intriguing, I'm just like, okay, it goes on to say someone who's captivating, delightful, riveting, alluring, appealing, compelling, and curious. Curious. I'm like, you know what? That's the more I started to think about it, the more I'm like, this intriguing thing is, it's intriguing. And so I'm like, yeah, I want to be intriguing. I want people to look at me and go, man, that guy's unusual. Wow, he's a little mysterious. And I mean, going on, compelling and curious. It's, and it almost goes back to what I'm doing right here. I'm curious. I'm curious as to what people are thinking and what questions somebody might have for a person like me. Am I compelling enough? Am I intriguing enough for people who are watching this and listening to it to go, wow, that guy he's unusual. He's mysterious. I have some questions that I want to ask him and see what his answers are, because he seems like he's somebody that's different. And the differences that we have certainly help define us as humans. And so that's the more I thought about it, I'm just like, okay, yeah, you know what, I think that's my answer. So to my friend who sent me this great question, I want to be intriguing. And to my friend also who's been who seemed to struggle with this question or said that they couldn't answer it themselves, I know this person, and you know what? You've already become who you supposed to be, because you already are intriguing. You already are captivating, delightful, riveting, compelling, and curious. So I don't really think you need to ponder this question anymore. I think you've gone beyond the answer. You're pretty much already there. So I really appreciate that question, because I did not expect to really go down this rabbit hole that I went down, as far as taking the question from a deeper standpoint than just something like something so animate as being a doctor or a lawyer. And so I feel like there's a lot of people out there who have probably only thought about that question in that regards, as opposed to what they want to be, emotionally, spiritually, if we will. So yeah, I think that's my final answer, is what I want to be when I grow up. I want to be intriguing, and I think everybody else does. Thank you for your question. So my next question is, what board game do you like the most? And that's a tough one, because growing up, I was born in 1972. So growing up in the 70s, way before smartphones and computers and just all the chaos that children are exposed to today, it was simpler. And so to pass the time, board games was a real thing. It was a family pastime. And it's sad that it seems like that's kind of gone to the wayside, because there's just so much entertainment out there for children and adults And so it takes away from the children's playtime because the adults are enthralled with, all these TV shows and everything else. But with the board games, there were just so many of them. It's really hard to choose which is my favorite. I mean, because you've got some very popular games and some smaller games. Obviously, growing up, we weren't the wealthiest family. We had everything we needed, so we had just a few board games. But I feel like we had some pretty good ones. And obviously, one of the main games was Monopoly. Or should I call it Cryopoly? Because inevitably, at some point in time during the game, especially with children involved, somebody's going to be crying. Because the whole point of the game is somebody wins and obviously somebody loses. And, obviously the people that are losing aren't having a good time. And I did have an older brother who's 2.5 years older than me. And so I was the youngest. We only had, two in our family. And so obviously I was the one doing the crying because I was always losing because I wasn't smart with my money. My brother, very intelligent, and very good with his money, growing up. I could never. My dad was Navy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, which I want to reiterate with this, that I'm blessed to have my mom at home growing up. That's an experience that I really think is wonderful. And so I don't want to diminish that at all by saying that my mom was a stay-at-home mom, because it's incredibly honorable. But we only had my dad's military salary, which, wasn't a lot, but it was more than enough. And so we would get, my dad would get paid on the 1st and 15th. And so we would get a small little allowance. And I think it was $1 at one point. And I think maybe once we got to like 10 or 11 or something like that, it went up to $2 a pay period. And man, I would just blow that money like so fast. I would go to the, Kmart, way before Walmart was a big thing. It was Kmart. And I'd go to Kmart and I would try and buy as many little trinkets as I could with that dollar. And obviously, Hot Wheels and some action figures and stuff like that. And I'd blow through it. My brother, on the other hand, was just so smart with his money. He would save it up to get the big stuff. I mean, like, especially when, Star Wars came out, he saved up to get the X-Wing, Luke Skywalker fighter. And I'm just like, well, I want the X-Wing Luke Skywalker fighter. And my mom's just like, well, you're just going to have to save your money. And I'm like, but that's going to take like 2 months of me saving. I don't have the patience for that. And I didn't. I would just blow right through the money. But getting off on that, going back to Monopoly, I just wasn't good with my money. I didn't understand. I didn't understand the game until I started getting older, which is understandable. But but my brother was so with it and so smart. He understood the game, and the whole principle of the game is monopoly. You create a monopoly. You try and buy up as much of stuff, and basically you want to try and work your other. Your team, the people that you're playing against, work them into the ground, work them into bankruptcy. And it's like, you think about it from one standpoint, it's like, man, that game is cruel. However, I think every child needs to play that game, needs to play it a lot. I almost think like, every child in every grade, all the way up to, high school, they should at least, once a week be playing that game, to start to learn that the real world is tough, and the strong survive, and you really need to be with it and understand the principles of the game, not just the game of Monopoly, the game of life. And so I really think that particular game, although it was designed to be fun, it's really more of kind of a life lesson. And I think more children today should be playing Monopoly to help them learn not only of things that can help them succeed, but also learn humility in losing, and understand how they lost, and to grow from that. So it's really a kind of a life lesson. And now that I've segued into that, the other board game that I really liked was the Game of Life. And what a fantastic game. It does almost the same thing as Monopoly. It really can teach some valuable life lessons because you start at the beginning of the game, and my memory is really bad. I'm probably going to get some things wrong. But you can choose whether or not you want to go down a career path, a professional path where you get a degree, or you can stay, in the regular path. And then also you can decide whether you want to go to college. And what's interesting is that, if you want to go the college route, you have to take a loan. And, in the game, as in real life, you pay back the loan. They don't have anything that's going to, pay the loan for you. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. I won't get on that. But, along the way in this Game of Life, the board game, is that you can choose whether or not you want to have children. And with that comes certain responsibilities because you, along the way in the board game, you might get hit with a little card that says, if you have X amount of children, that, it's going to cost you this because of this, medical thing that came up. But the really, interesting part is that when you get to the end of the game, you have all these life cards that you total it up, plus you total up all your cash and everything, and then you get the end value. So it's like at the end of your life, you get an end value. And the children that you have, they're an asset. They actually come with monetary gain at the end of your life. And oh wow, the symbolism there is very true because, people who have children, there is incredible value there. And obviously not from a monetary value, but from a emotional value and a spiritual value. Me and my wife, we tried for several years, and children just didn't work for us. And so it's going to be interesting when we get to that stage in our life is not having that value around. And so incredibly envious and I guess envious is the word, of people who are going to have that value in their life when they get to that point. Not to get so downer right there, but to go back to the Game of Life is that I think that it's like Monopoly. I think people should play that. I think children should play that game, so that it can teach them, some life lessons. They can play it multiple times, try different scenarios, and see the cause and effect of the Game of Life, the board game, and what that can do for the end. So it's a very interesting game. Like I said, it's very close to Monopoly, as far as that. I feel it's got more life lessons than it is for sheer entertainment value. But to get back to the meat and potatoes of the question here is, what is my favorite board game? And again, it has almost similar things to Monopoly in life, in that it offers some certain life lessons. And that board game is called Chutes and Ladders. Now I know what you're going to say is, man, that's a board game for small children, like really small children. Like I can't remember, but I'm going to say 4 to 6 years old. And I'm like, it might say that on the box, but I really think it's for all ages. I mean, like all ages, all the way into adults. I think adults should be playing this game on the regular because it teaches you, some similar to cause and effect. I mean, you have this little dial that has, 1 through a certain number, and then you spin the dial and it lands on a number, and then you move along, and then you either go to a little square that you go nowhere, or you go to a square that has a ladder. And then as you progress in the game, you might go to a square that has a chute or a slide, and you slide and you go backwards. And so the board game allows you to experience leaping forward, getting an advancement, making headway somewhere. And then you hit a chute and you slide back down, possibly to way far back from where you were. And you wind up learning about, learning humility and learning failure, and also learning how to get back up, spin the little dial again, and continue on. Because, you got to continue playing the game. Unlike in Chutes and Ladders, you can pack the game up and put it in a box and put it in the closet and never play it again. But this game of life, we can't. The only time we pack it up is when we pack it up. And so the game of Chutes and Ladders really, really hits that out of the park, because it just teaches you just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. Now playing it as a child, it's another, kind of cryopoly, where at some point in time, as a child, you're thinking about winning. You're thinking about getting to that 100 square and being the first up there. Whereas, where you see all the other people that are ahead of you, even though you're sliding and you're failing and stuff like that. But, from a child playing it standpoint, I still think it's a valuable game of life, a valuable game of the ups and the downs, and the inconsistencies, the uncertainties that you're going to run into in life, and how that can affect you, and how you deal with that, how you deal with those consequences. So you flick that little dial, and it lands on a chute, and you go sliding down. It's teaching you how to deal with it. And so I guess a long, roundabout conversation about what my favorite board game is. We've more talked about, how these games have affected, me personally, and how they have affected possibly, tons of people, and how I feel that they should be, they should be continually played. These games that have been around for, I'm 52. They've been around for a while, and I hope that they're around for a very long time, because I feel they do have value, more so than just from an entertainment standpoint. So that's going to be my final answer. The final answer for what board game do I like the most is Chutes and Ladders. Thank you for your question. So for the next question, the question is, if I had to change my name, what would it be? Well, when I saw that question, it didn't take very long, maybe a half a second, for me to come up with my answer. And the answer is that I'd want to be named after my mother's father. And his name was Kirksey, spelled Kirksey. Kirksey. And the story is, initially my mother wanted to name me after him. But apparently he refused. He didn't like it, or he didn't want me to be called that. And I don't know if it was because, he was born in, I think, 1918, and Kirksey, I guess maybe sounded like curtsy. I don't know if that's why he was reserved about that. At least that's the story that I was told. But I love my name that my parents gave me. They gave me that name with love, and I honor that name. At least I hope I honor that name. But if I had to choose, I would want to be named after my mother's father, Kirksey. Now, he passed away when I was young. I'm not sure, maybe I was 5 or 6. So I can't really say that I know the man as a man, like me as a man now, like I know him. But I know of all the stories and all the truth about him, and what kind of man that he was. He was a pillar in the community. He was a pillar in the local Baptist church. And he did a lot of great things. Amongst that, raised 3 incredible daughters that went on to be unbelievably successful in their own lives. So knowing all of those stories about this profound individual was what brought me to decide if I were to change my name, to change it to that. But not only that, but the name Kirksey, I don't know, to me it sounds manly. It sounds distinguished to come up and say, "Hello, my name is Kirksey." It's just unique, and I guess I just like the uniqueness of it. Like in another question that I answered, I talked about me wanting to be unique, and so I feel that that's also a driving factor. But all the great memories I had of him, growing up, he called me his little buddy. Um, he had this swivel rocking chair, and he used to chase me around in it, like a grandfather should, just having fun with his grandkids. And then I've got a wonderful picture. It's a fond memory of me and him sitting in front of his house where him and his wife raised their 3 daughters. And we're sitting out there on lawn chairs eating grapes. And I'm just there in my little clothes with no shoes on, like every little boy should be. And just, I think I got a mouthful of grapes. And to this day, I still love grapes and still brings back just wonderful memories of that. And then some of the funny stories of that I've heard, and I've actually seen the picture. He actually made it in the newspaper. I think it was kind of like it was definitely a gag, but it was apparently he was this masked dueling guitar player. There in the picture, he has 2 acoustic guitars in his hands, and obviously it's satirical, and but it just goes to his his the funniness of this man, even as distinguished as he was, that he could have a good time and be funny. And then there's the other cute story of if I'm remembering it right, I'm probably not, but my mom will definitely correct me on this. Is that he used to play Santa. He was definitely could fit the role. He was a little round and very boisterous and could absolutely play Santa. He played Santa many times. And what he would do is he would dress up as Santa, and then, Christmas Eve, he would go around to all the houses and, go into the house and give the little kids presents and everything, from Santa. And I think I knew that. I think I could tell, like I saw him somewhere in his Santa suit, and I'm just like, that's Bub. I called him Bub. I think one of my older cousins started calling him Bub, and then obviously all the grandkids called him Bub. And so I knew it was Bub. And so when everybody was telling me that Santa was going to come to the house, I'm just like, it's Bub, And so they used to say, "Here comes Santa," and Santa walks through the door, and I'm just indifferent. I'm just like, it's Bub. And the next thing you know, here comes Bub walking in behind the Santa, and I'm just like, it's just stunned. I'm just like, that's really Santa. That must really be Santa, And so just stories like that, and hearing all the stuff that he did around the community, just really brings provenance to the name, and provenance to why I would choose that name, on top of the fact that I think it sounds absolutely manly. So yeah, that's going to be my final answer, is that if I had to change my name, what would it be? I would change it to Kirksey, after my grandfather. Thank you for the question.